Okay, so I'm back, and so where we were at was making this plinth for our donut, and I'm just going to do a tiny bit of organization. And so we've got scene objects, we've got the donut, turn that on, we can see it there, and what we're going to do is we're going to use a different rendering engine. And so what we've got is we've been doing everything in cycles, and cycles is awesome because like if we like rendered this out, you know, it's gonna look great. It's gonna texture that really beautifully. We're gonna get like a really lovely natural look to everything. But the problem is that it's slow, and we're gonna be rendering a scene where we're gonna be adding lots of extra elements, and so we're gonna change it to a different rendering engine. We're gonna change it to Eevee, and so there we go. We flipped over it. What it's got is it's got the background that I had before, which was like some kind of interior of some place. Kind of looks pretty nice, but I don't know. I think that needs some furniture. And this is the final render, and this is how fast it is. So you'll notice that the difference between this and cycles is that cycles, I'm waiting, it updates, it renders it out. It looks amazing, but it's slow. So we're going to use Eevee from now on because Eevee is quick. The problem is we've got this kind of thing in the background, and we want to get rid of that. And so if we go to film, turn on transparency, and we got rid of that background layer. But you can see that we're getting real-time reflections, real-time texturing, and all that kind of stuff. And that means that our render times will be very, very quick. And this looks a bit flat and everything, and we'll change that later. But at the moment, we're just going to leave it. But essentially what we're going to do is turn on ambient occlusion, and ambient occlusion will basically make this, it will give all of the little shadows underneath, and so now it'll make it look a little bit better. Okay, so but we'll get onto that because that's going to up our render times, and we want to be really, really careful of render times because we're going to be doing quite a big scene with lots of big objects, and we want to be mindful of that. And the other thing is that it's got an environment, and the environment has got this NS HDR, and I want to change that because what I want to use is I want to use a different type of, so if we go into world, we can see that we've got a background, and this background is this, okay, and I'm going to change that, and I've got better ones, and I've given you those. Go to my Blender work, it will be on your shared drive, and I'll show you all of that. I'll go to HDRI, and I've got a small cave scene, which coincidentally mirrors the scene that we're finally going to build. So when I go onto film and I turn off transparent, you can see we've got a cave scene. The great thing, so here we've got my light. So if I go into my, so this is my light object. So let me see where that is. So we've got the light off. If I turn that off, what? Everything's still lit up. And that's because HDRI's light are seen. It's a very difficult thing to explain, but what it does is it takes this high dynamic range object, everything light, it applies as light, everything dark, it applies as shadow. So we end up with something that looks hyper real because we're using real-time data to light our things, even if we make it transparent, which is cool. So that means we don't need a light. So we get rid of it, which is kind of awesome. I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need it anymore, because we're going to create a whole new camera for this scene, and we're going to get onto that. So now we've got our scene, and what we're going to do is we're going to import our character. Now thankfully I'm not going to ask you to do any like character animation. I've done all the heavy lifting for you, and so I'll bring that in for you now. Let's just hide the camera, and I'm going to rename this as well because you should just rename stuff as you go. And we're going to call this plinth. I keep changing the name of it. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to call it yeah, plinth. Sounds like a good name. That just sort of came into my head, but that's kind of cool. Okay, so we got that plinth, and now I'm going to import the character. So what I've done is so I've got a character. I basically downloaded a character, which was an empty character, and then I downloaded some motion capture data, which you can download from Adobe. Adobe's got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of motion capture data. People running around, climbing, you know, sitting down, and having a chat. You know, you name it, they've got it. And then what you do is you get a character, and then you download it, and then you download the motion capture data, and then you kind of stick it on. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's essentially what you've done. And so what I've done is I've kind of done all of that for you, so you don't have to. So I'm going to go to import, and I'm going to import the model, and the model is an FBX model. An FBX is basically a type of 3D file that contains all of the textures and everything all contained into one big file. The problem is it ends up as being a very, very big file. And so what I've got is I've got one where a character is walking and stopping walking, and I've got another one where they're holding a torch. So I'm going to import that. So and it imports it, and there we go. So I'm going to and all of this is in separate. So I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to turn off the donut, which is floating around rather madly, and I'm just going to queue frame selected. So here is my character. Okay. So if I go to layout, I'll just go queue frame selected, and you can see all of the keyframes, the animation, and this is our character doing her stuff. Okay, and what she's doing, she's pretending that she's holding a torch, and she's lighting up the environment, and then she turns back to face whatever she's doing. Okay, all of this stuff takes a while, but what we can do is we can take all of these things and we can essentially move them and make this whole thing a little. You can literally take like bits of data, and you can copy them and then go here and then paste them, and you kind of keep it moving and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's basically just animation data, animation keyframes. There's lots of them, I agree, but that's essentially what it is. And then what we've got all of this stuff. We've got armature, and the armature is essentially like these bones, and these bones basically deform the model. As you can see down here, we got like the spine, we got the feet, we got the hands, and they're all little bones, and these bone systems basically kind of do all of the animation for us, and that's where all of the motion capture data is applied. It's all here. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means that we've got a character. You can turn off bits and bobs of the character. It will look a bit weird, so don't do that. So what we've got is we've got our character, and then we've got our plinth. And so here's our plinth here. I'm going to turn it back on, and what we will notice, sorry if I turn the actual collection on, which would be interesting, is, my goodness, that plinth is big. And so what we've got to do is we've got to kind of basically scale up our objects to fit, because at the moment our armature is not big enough for the plinth and it looks a bit weird. So the way that you work with characters is you want to select the armature itself. Okay, do not select the mesh. If you select the mesh, you will break the object in fundamental ways, and it's going to be really difficult for me to repair it, because just basically select this bit, the armature, and then you can scale up your character, and you can move her around and do all of that. And you can see she's got all of the textures. They're not great textures, I'm going to have to say. They're just okay. Again, they came from the model itself. You can see them. They're not very highly detailed, and they don't have a huge amount of kind of texture to them. We can fix that, and we're going to do that in a minute. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to scale it up so it looks roughly the same. It looks in proportion to the donut. I mean, I think she looks a little bit big, so I'm going to move her kind of like that way. And then also we want her, that kind of looks about right. And so when we kind of go through the animation, we can see that she's moving like that, and that looks okay to me. Yeah. And there is lots of stuff that you can do to kind of, like, you can grab all of this, and I'm going to move these. I'm going to move these along because I want it to be 250 frames long, and that'll do for me. I'm just moving this along so we get some movement. Then she's going to turn around, she's going to have a little look-see, see what's crack-a-lacking, and then she's going to turn around and she's going to go, right, that donut's for me. And then, and then we're in business. Okay, textures wise, let's have a look and see what we've got. So she has been textured, not great, but she has been textured. I mean, undeniably. We're going to go back to objects, and we can see that she has been given a texture, and she has been given a normal map, and the normal map, it's all a bit kind of stretched out, and so there is a bump map for it, non-color, and the strength is 1. And then we just kind of zoom in and see what's going on. I mean, it's 1, I think it doesn't work super well. I think it needs a bit more, but it's reasonably okay. I mean, it could really do with a roughness map. So I'm going to bring one in because I think that it will really help with the final render. I've got a really good one called Scratches. I'm going to use that one, and I'm going to bring that in as a roughness map. And that will, you can see it looks a bit weird at the moment, but what it will do is when we take down the metallic, we're going to end up with something that's looking very shiny at the moment. And so what we need to do is we need to sort of change that. So I'm going to flop that onto the metallic, and then that is going to change the way that this looks. And then we can bring down the roughness or bring up the roughness and kind of create more of an interesting texture. Okay, and so that looks a little bit more kind of poppy, and I kind of like the look of it. Okay, so this is cool. Okay, there's lots of other things that we could do to it. I mean, maybe that one, I'm going to take this, in fact I'm going to drop that onto the roughness again, and I'm going to go add, and I'm going to add a RGB curve. Let's just kind of make this a bit smaller. And what we're going to do is just kind of like flatten it out a little bit to kind of make it a little bit more we're just trying to add a little bit more detail to it, so you can see, that's without, looks very flat, and then with, it just gives a little bit more to it, and we're going to be lighting the hell out of this, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Then we're going to turn off the armature, and now we can see what we're left with. So our character is doing a thing, and this is all cool. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to build the torch, and then I'm going to show you how to parent the torch to her so that it looks like she's carrying it, and then I'm going to show you how to do some visual effects to kind of put the flame in.